time now to meet our architect of the week. Let's see who Anuradha Mojumdar is visiting this week.
Our architect of the week, Craig Nealy, has worked on high-profile projects all over the globe. With world-class residences, office and retail spaces in his kitty, we caught up with him at his latest project, a luxury apartment at SD Corp's The Imperial on the 49th floor, where we learned about the project and about the designer himself.
Well, I learned I wanted to be an architect when I was babysitting for an architect who was my parents' friend when I was in high school, and I found a book on Frank Lloyd Wright, and I was always good at drawing and painting, but when I looked at this book, I thought, geez, this would be maybe it'd be fun to do buildings, and that's when I made up my mind, pretty much. And it was about 40 years ago. I joined a big firm where I worked for 15 years and did tall buildings, primarily because my professors in college always said, oh, Craig, you know, your strength is with the interior design and detail. And so to prove them wrong, I got a master's in urban design, and actually I've done some master planning projects here in India.
All you need to do is take a look around the apartment to get a taste of what he has to offer.
All of my work since I began, and I was given a long lead wherever I worked when I worked for someone else's. People tend to like my work, and they like it because I actually like to create a space that cheers you up or makes you feel better. So, you know, abstract theory and sort of academic thought in architecture is interesting to me, but what's most interesting to me is if you go into a space that I design and you go, wow, like that, and it just takes you out of your mind for a moment. And I've been very fortunate to do that, you know, on a bunch of projects over the years. So then I went to work for a guy, after him, I was with him for a number of years. I went to work for a really famous architect who does luxury retail. He does, and I was in charge of Louis Vuitton when we redid Louis Vuitton in Paris and London. And he didn't care anything about architecture with an A. He really cared about how does it look, how does it touch, and what looks rich and what communicates luxury. Because I worked for Bernard Arnault. I did his office in Paris, and I worked for doing the Christian Dior, part of the Christian Dior store for Vuitton and also for Guerlain. And so I traveled back and forth to Paris working for Peter, and that's when I really got into luxury.
So what was the brief given to him before he began the project?
I met Amit actually through an architect, the architect of this building, Amit Thacker, who was ended up being my very forward-thinking and progressive-thinking client. And basically, he told me about this building, and I told him about how much I loved India, and I said, you know, I really wanted to make this, in many ways, a celebration of India. You know, India's in a very special place in its history right now. It's in kind of a triumphal place, and you know, where it's risen and to be a global player, and it's the world's largest democracy. So, you know, if you pair that with like loving Bollywood and loving color, and just the Indians really live their lives. You know, they're very much about life, which is very inspiring. So, so I said to him, you know, it's one thing to do an Indian apartment, but it's another thing to do a global apartment with an Indian flair or with an Indian sort of scent. And that's really what I was able to bring to the table, was my experience with luxury in Paris, and my experience with the wealthy in the US, and my experience in Tokyo. So I knew what was luxurious in Japan, what was luxurious in Paris, what's luxurious in London, what's luxurious in New York. So I said to him, you know, whoever buys an apartment of this magnitude has multiple residences, and in that group of people, there are what I call signifiers of wealth, which are certain things, certain finishes, certain style, certain way of doing things. It's even a little more conservative than for someone who has like an academic background, or you know, if you're designing for a professor, or you're designing for a tycoon, the tycoon is going to want something a little bit more conservative, and that's the whole story behind Ralph Lauren. Because Ralph Lauren designs for that person who wants to be sure he's getting the right thing. And so I said to Amin, if I do it, your wealthy clientele will be sure that they're getting the right thing. They'll walk in and they will feel at home. And he put some wonderful faith and trust in me, and off we went.
That sounds like quite a task. There must have been challenges.
Design is nothing but a series of challenges. I mean, that's really, it's problem solving. I mean, like any profession, I think. Whether it's, whether you're, you know, among the professions. Our biggest challenge here, actually, I think probably it was, I really don't, we were asking people to go a little bit further all the time. So not only did we push the envelope, but we pushed the contractor's envelope. And again, I have to say, you know, Masters was so great because they chased me down and asked me every question all the way through. So they really made the process much easier for me, because I'd say, I want a bracket that looks like that, and 3 weeks later there would be one. So they were wonderful. And if anything, it was just jamming everything into this floor plan, which was kind of a challenge.
So does he have a signature style?
I think it's more a philosophy or a sensibility than a specific style per se. We're definitely modernists, but you know, I have a retail business in the U.S. called Romantic Modern, and you know, Romantic Modern it's a good kind of sobriquet for us. I mean, because the work we do, there's always an element of glamour, there's always an element of comfort, but it's simple. It's what I always say is a simple line rendered in a luxurious material. So we stay away from things that are fussy, and you know, it's much more like, and I think a lot of that comes from living in Manhattan and working in these global cities that are so frenetic and crazy, like Hong Kong and Tokyo and even Paris, although Paris seems like everyone's walking in slow motion compared to the other two cities. But you know, it's like in New York, when you get home, you want to like close the door and just go, phew, and you know, just shake the day off. And you know, so we provide asylum for a lot of people.
We end with Craig's interesting take on the development of architecture and interiors.
There's this kind of curve that goes along with economic development. And you know, the first generation of people who, they just want, if they're a businessman, they just want a shed basically to put their workers in with a roof over their head and a bathroom and a place to eat lunch, and that's all. Then, you know, once they start making a little more money, they think, well, maybe their building should like speak to their corporate ethos or be a symbol of their success. But they haven't traveled and they haven't really thought about it. So they just ask, well, who's a good modern architect? So that's really phase one in a growing culture of like modern architecture. Then a little farther along than that, after this first architect has built a whole bunch of stuff, the newly wealthy people start to travel. And once they start to travel, they begin to see buildings in different cities, and then they go back to their city and they say, well, maybe we need to do buildings that are a little bit more sophisticated. So that's like stage two. And really, I watched China do it, and now India is very much in the middle of stage two, where they're hiring foreign architects and using them. And you really see some buildings of tremendous sophistication here in Bombay, but also there's some fabulous new architecture in Pune. There's terrific buildings going up in Calcutta and in Chennai, all over the country really. Really good architects coming in. So what the next segment is going to be, when India's own children have gone to the West or studied here, and they themselves are sophisticated as any foreign architect.
Well, that's all we have for you on the show today. We would love to hear from you. Write to us with your feedback and suggestions at hotproperty@ndtv.com or SMS us at 56388. We'll see you again next week at the same time. Till then, from the entire team of Hot Property, goodbye and thanks for watching.